Hey guys, tonight we're not lighting torches for medieval kings or following the silk robes of emperors. No, tonight we're barefoot in a dust bowl, squinting into the heat haze with cracked lips and tea-stained teeth. We're heading straight into the scrubby heart of 19th century Australia, where everything wants to bite you, boil you, or bankrupt you. The land doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're new here, if your boots are worn through, or if you've only had damper and lukewarm billy tea for the past 5 days. It doesn't care because the snakes, the sun, and the flies were here first. And they plan on staying. You, though? You just arrived, and you're already wondering where the shade went. Spoiler, it left in January and won't be back till March. You probably won't survive this, but you'll try anyway, because that's what everyone else did. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it right now in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the middle of a dry paddock, staring out at a flat, buzzing nowhere. The heat makes the horizon ripple like jelly. Behind you, the windmill clanks. In front of you, the sheep blink slowly, chewing cud like they're waiting for the end times. It's the 1850s. You're not in a town. You're barely near one. This is a selection, a chunk of free land given out under the promise that if you break your back long enough, it might one day grow something other than despair. Government wants you to improve it. That's the actual word, improve. Right now, it's just a rectangle of dust with a dead eucalyptus in the middle. You clutch your tin mug of tea because that's the only thing anyone has told you works. Tea when you're tired. Tea when you're sick. Tea before digging a post hole. Tea after stepping on a snake. Tea when your only neighbor dies of heat stroke and no one notices for a week. Historians still argue whether the Australian colonial addiction to tea was a comfort, a coping mechanism, or just a way to hide the taste of terrible water. What's not debated? Everyone drank it. You'd boil it in a blackened billy, strain it through your teeth, and thank the Queen for the privilege. The dust is everywhere. Inside your shirt. Under your fingernails. In your dreams. It creeps into your flour bag and your lungs, and yes, into your tea. You try not to think about the fact that it might contain traces of sheep droppings and the burnt remains of a grasshopper. You drink it anyway. You need the caffeine. And frankly, it's warm and reminds you that something in this wasteland can still be made by human hands. Behind the shack you built from rotted posts and leftover crates, there's a lean-to where you sleep. The canvas roof flaps all night, and you're not sure if the rustling is wind or something more slithery. The floor's just hard-packed dirt. Sometimes, in the early morning, you see tiny lizard tracks sketched across it like forgotten handwriting. The lizards know this land better than you. You're starting to wonder if they're smarter too. Your only source of water is a dam you dug yourself. It looks less like a lake and more like a giant, muddy teacup, fitting, really. During dry seasons, it turns into a cracked bowl with one angry toad living in it. You give that toad a name. You have full conversations with it. No one said you'd stay entirely sane out here. Did we mention the flies yet? No? Oh, they're coming. Swarms of them. Clouds of them. You'll eat one by accident sometime around section 3. For now, you just wave your hand uselessly and keep sipping your tea like it's armor. Some settlers used to say that the land didn't want them there. That it was actively trying to spit them out. This wasn't a place that offered easy welcome. No harvest festivals. No leafy groves. No babbling brooks. Just brittle grass, occasional droughts, and if you were really unlucky, a plague of mice that would eat your soap and your hairbrush and then move onto your bed. There were rules, of course. Things you had to follow to prove your worth, fencing part of the land, planting something that could pass as food, surviving 5 years without losing a limb or your mind. Easy enough, right? You cook over a fire. You bake with ashes. You wash your clothes in a bucket shared with the dishes and occasionally your feet. Your first attempt at growing something ends with your potatoes cooking in the ground. You laugh, mostly because crying wastes moisture. Still, there are nights when the sky unfolds above you like a hand-painted ceiling. When the breeze is just cool enough to feel like mercy. When the tea tastes almost like hope. You sit by the fire, stare into the dark, and you think, maybe, just maybe, this can work. Until a huntsman spider climbs out of your boot and ruins everything. You wake up with a mouthful of grit and the distinct sensation that something has burrowed into your sock during the night. Welcome to the land that hates you back. Australia in the 1800s isn't just untamed, it's practically taunting you. The dirt is uncooperative, the animals are suspiciously venomous, and the sun seems personally offended by your presence. This land isn't wild in the romantic, paint me like one of your French forests kind of way. It's dry, loud, and prickly. The birds scream like car alarms. The plants are spiky and smell like soap and resentment. You try to grow wheat and it dies. You try corn and it dies. You try growing hope and, well, that too. Your boots crunch over parched ground that's cracked like old leather. No matter how many holes you dig, water always seems 1 meter further than your shovel can reach. The soil, if you can call it that, looks like something scraped from the bottom of a wood-burning stove. You think about buying fertilizer. Then you remember you haven't seen another human in 12 days, let alone a store. The British, bless them, sent you here with pamphlets that describe the land as ready for cultivation. Which is like describing a crocodile as slightly damp luggage. Historians still argue whether the government actually believed that, or just needed to get rid of a few thousand restless citizens with shovels and unrealistic dreams. You eye the horizon. It does not eye you back. That would be too generous. Snakes are your neighbors now. They hang around your woodpile like they pay rent. The big ones leave trails in the dust behind them, like nature's version of a threatening letter. You learn to tap your boots out in the morning. You also learn to tap your pillow. And your coat. And, once, your tea tin. Your shack isn't insulated. Nothing is. The tin roof gets so hot at midday you could fry eggs on it, assuming you had eggs and a death wish. The heat doesn't just bake the outside of your body. It reaches into your skull and whispers strange thoughts. By 3 p.m., you're talking to your rake like it's a person who just doesn't get you. The local wildlife seems engineered for violence. Kangaroos can punch. Emus can run at you like a linebacker with feathers. The ants are aggressive and taste like battery acid if you're brave, or delirious, enough to find out. Then there's the rain. When it comes, it doesn't trickle or tease. It descends like someone's upturned a basin the size of the moon. And just when you think, finally, something to drink, you realize it's flooding your tool shed and floating your firewood halfway to Queensland. That's not a metaphor. You literally find your saw half a mile away the next morning. But you learn to work with it. Kind of. The locals, indigenous Australians, have been managing this land for tens of thousands of years. They knew how to burn it, care for it, read it like a breathing map. Most settlers ignored that wisdom, of course. We'll use English farming techniques, they said. They've never failed before, they said. You already know how that ends. There's a plant near your camp, scraggly, grey, unimpressive, that you once saw a dingo pee on. Turns out, if you boil it just right, it repels flies better than any imported lotion. A passing bushman teaches you this in a tone that implies you should have known it already. You pretend you did. You start cataloguing these little miracles, which tree bark works like soap, which grass dulls a toothache, which direction to run if a goanna steals your damper. These aren't in any handbook. You just learn. Or you don't. And if you don't, well, the land isn't cruel. It's just completely indifferent. You dig a pit toilet 50 paces from your shack. 50 exact. You count every step because one morning you will stumble out half asleep and make a critical error. You'll fix that pit with old wool sacks and a hopeful prayer. It won't help. Nothing short of a full exorcism would. Some nights, the stars are so bright you feel like you're in the belly of a glittering beast. Other nights, the wind howls through the cracks in your walls like it's trying to tell you something, and not something nice. You once heard a sound like a crying baby at 2 a.m. No babies live out here. You didn't go looking. Smart choice. Quirky fact for you, some settlers, desperate for shade, tried planting rows of imported English trees. They lasted about as long as a snowman in a furnace. Meanwhile, the native mulga trees you cursed for scratching your arms are still there, still alive, still mocking you with their smug, dry silence. You get one letter every few months if you're lucky. Maybe from family in Sydney. Maybe from someone who forgot to forward your new address. Either way, it's a reminder that somewhere else, people walk on cobblestones and complain about rain instead of celebrating it like divine intervention. You start noticing the changes in yourself. Your hands are cracked but capable. Your back aches, but it bends without breaking. You think less, feel more, curse creatively. You don't scream when you see a snake anymore. You just nod and give it space. It lives here too. Eventually, you stop asking if the land will forgive you for being here. It won't. It doesn't have to. But every once in a while, it lets you stay a little longer. And that's enough. You don't often see them in the books, those early settler women. But they're there, tucked behind the smoke of a cooking fire or wringing out a shirt over a cracked bucket. You pass through a station today and meet one. She doesn't shake your hand. She doesn't even blink at you. She just hands you a cup of tea and keeps stirring the stew like she's trying to summon God. She looks younger than she should. Or older. It's hard to tell. The sun here carves years into your skin whether you've earned them or not. She lives in a slab hut with a roof that leaks and a husband who doesn't speak much. She's got 3 kids, 1 goat, and more flies in the kitchen than you've ever seen in your life. One of them lands on your lip while you sip. You pretend not to notice. Everyone here pretends. It's polite. These women don't have a choice. They come because their husbands drag them, or because their fathers sell land dreams and canvas tents. They follow the wagons with wide eyes and closed mouths, and when they get to the middle of nowhere, they unpack a crate and try to build a home with it. You look around her hut and see the signs, crushed wildflowers pressed under glass, a child's drawing in charcoal on the door, a patchwork curtain made from old dresses. There's nothing easy here, but still, she's managed to stitch beauty into the corners of it. That's not luck. That's work. Historians still argue whether women in early settlements had any real power. Legally, they didn't. Socially, they were expected to serve, sew, and stay quiet. But out here, power looks different. It's knowing how to dress a wound while boiling porridge. It's birthing a child alone while keeping one eye on the firewood pile. It's negotiating with a passing swagman while holding a crying toddler and a shotgun. You sit on an overturned bucket while she tells you about the last dust storm. Lasted 3 days, she says, without looking up. Goat ended up on the roof. You wait for a punchline, but there isn't one. The tea tastes like overboiled strength. Maybe that's the only kind she knows how to make. You ask if the station has a midwife. She laughs. Not a kind laugh. That'd be me, she says. She's delivered 7 babies that aren't hers. 2 lived. The rest, well, there's not always enough boiled water or hope. You stare into your cup and say nothing. Later, you help her fix a fence. Her hands are rougher than yours. You feel ashamed of your soft fingers and your wandering ways. She doesn't comment on your clumsy knots. Just redoes them when you look away. She points out a spot on the ground where she buried the family dog last week. Snake got him, she says. Don't think he even knew. You nod like that's normal. Because out here, it is. The kids chase a chicken through the dust while she salts a side of mutton. One of them, barefoot, grinning, with teeth missing like a piano in need of tuning, asks if you've ever seen a crocodile. You lie and say yes. The boy nods sagely, like that's exactly what he thought. You catch her looking at the horizon once, quiet and long. You don't ask what she's thinking about. But you guess it's not the stew. Maybe it's the town she left behind. Maybe it's the sound of church bells she hasn't heard in a decade. Maybe it's just the idea of a bed without mice in the straw. Quirky detail, some women in these parts made fly bonnets out of muslin and stiff wire. They'd wear them inside the house. Not for fashion. Just for sanity. She shows you hers, fraying at the edges, dotted with tea stains, held together with thread and sheer bitterness. You offer to chop firewood before you leave. She doesn't thank you, just gestures to the stack. You swing the axe, and it feels like penance. There's a kind of silence when you leave. Not from her. From the land. It's like the air folds around her space and holds it tight. You walk down the track with the memory of her still buzzing like a fly behind your ear. She wasn't extraordinary. But also, she was. Women like her didn't write the rules of the bush, they enforced them with calloused fingers and unread journals. They raised kids, buried pets, fought fever with eucalyptus oil and blind faith. They were the anchors on a ship that never docked. You think of her that night by the fire, boiling your billy. You try to make your tea the same way she did. It tastes like ash and regret. You smile anyway. You wonder how many women like her slept tonight with the same wind scratching at their walls. How many kissed the foreheads of kids who didn't know the world used to have pavement and clocks? How many laid down in hard beds and stared up at the ceiling, wishing the stars would come inside and talk to them? Your tea is cold by the time you finish thinking about it. You drink it anyway. You rise before the sun, always. There's no alarm clock out here, just the slow turning of heat inside your bones and the distant bleating of sheep who don't care that you're tired. You roll up your swag, just canvas, some stuffing, and a few hopeful dreams, and shake the scorpions out. Again. You're a swagman now. Not quite homeless, but definitely not fixed to one patch of land. You drift from station to station, job to job. You sleep under the stars, your campfire a flicker of comfort in a world that mostly wants to dry you out like jerky. There's no salary, only the promise of meat, a little money, and a safe place to boil your tea. Because the tea is non-negotiable. That battered tin billy of yours has seen more countryside than most ships. You swing it over the flames, wait for the furious rolling boil, then toss in the tea leaves, preferably strong, dark, and able to remove paint. You don't time it. You feel when it's ready. You swirl the leaves. You watch the bubbles. You whisper a swear word or two if the fire's misbehaving. You pour with one hand and swat flies with the other. You sip. It's too hot. It always is. But you drink it anyway, because this is how you begin the day. It's your shield against everything the world's about to throw at you: dust, hunger, sunstroke, snakebite, existential dread. There's an art to swagman living. You carry only what you can strap to your back or tie to your belt. A knife, a spoon, a flint, a half-broken pipe, a harmonica with 2 dead notes. Maybe a biscuit or 2, rock hard and smug about it. And the billy. Always the billy. Some men name theirs. You haven't yet, but you're starting to think it deserves one. Swagmen weren't respected. Not really. Settlers eyed them like stray dogs, sometimes fed them, sometimes ran them off with a broom. But they were necessary. They picked up the slack between towns. They delivered news before the post could. They told stories by the fire, played tunes, warned of bad stockmen and dry rivers. In a world this wide, sometimes all you had was the sound of a distant whistle and the hope someone else was walking your way. You know every kind of fence by feel. Barbed wire, post and rail, slip rail, dog fence. You know how to mend one in wind, how to brace it with bones if the posts rot out. You once saw a man patch a broken gate with a door from an abandoned outhouse. He swore it made the sheep behave better. Historians still argue whether swagmen improved the land or simply survived in spite of it. You stop mid-morning to fix a hole in your boot. Sit under a tree so bent and miserable it looks like it gave up halfway through growing. You mutter to yourself while you stitch. Out here, conversation is a luxury and muttering is a survival tool. One of your sheep wanders too close. You've got about 70 in the mob today, and this one keeps trying to nibble your coat. You shove it gently. It stares, unbothered. Sheep aren't smart. But they're yours. Or at least yours until you get to the next station and hand them off for pay and maybe a slab of beef fat to chew on. You've been paid in stranger things. A tooth once. A half bottle of ink. One station manager gave you a dog with a limp and a bad attitude. You kept him. He now sleeps on your swag and growls at mosquitoes. His name is Governor. Your days are simple, in the way that only very hard lives can be. Walk. Herd. Boil. Eat. Walk. You use your boots until the soles flap like gossiping mouths. You've walked across dry creek beds, over scorched rock, past the skeletons of cows who weren't as lucky or stubborn as you. At night, you find a soft patch, relatively speaking, and lay your swag near a fallen log. You check for snakes. You whistle. Governor circles twice and settles by your side. You build a fire. You boil the billy. There's something hypnotic about the process. The way the water shimmers just before it bubbles. The smell of burnt eucalyptus leaves. The way the tea darkens like old secrets. You drink it slow, even if it burns your tongue. Even if it tastes like metal and disappointment. Because in that moment, it tastes like home. A weird fringe fact you once heard, some swagmen carried tiny bottles of rum, not to drink, but to spike their tea. Not for the buzz, but to mask the taste of the water, which sometimes came from a creek shared with dead birds and confused cows. Others used crushed mint leaves. A few used salt. You tried all three. You regret 2 of them. You pull out your harmonica and play a tune so sad the wind slows down to listen. It's the only kind of music out here. That and the rustle of possums or the thud of a kangaroo doing midnight calisthenics near your fire. No one's around to hear you complain. That's the blessing and the curse. You can scream into the bush if a splinter gets infected. But no one will bring bandages either. You're alone. But in the kind of way that feels chosen. You wonder sometimes if you'll do this forever. Maybe find a station that lets you stay. Maybe marry the cook. Maybe die with your boots on and your billy still warm. Maybe not. For now, you just lie back, watch the stars shift into place, and sip what's left of the tea. It's stronger tonight. Bitter. A bit smoky. Just like you. The schoolhouse isn't much to look at. Just 4 walls of timber with a roof that's clearly offended by the concept of rainproof. There's no sign, no bell, no fence, just a single room in the middle of nowhere that smells faintly of dust, goat, and ink that dried out years ago. You're passing through another outpost settlement, and someone points to it like it's the town's pride. That's where the kids learn not to die stupid, he says. You nod. Fair enough. Inside, there's a blackboard so worn it mostly just remembers old lessons. A collection of slate boards rest on each desk like relics. The desks themselves are mismatched and scarred, many with initials carved deep by generations of bored bush children. Some even have tally marks, weeks spent counting flies or maybe days until they could escape. The teacher arrives late. She's got the look of someone who's read every book she owns 10 times and still isn't impressed by any of them. Her dress is plain, her face is sharp, and her chalk snaps in her hand like it owes her money. She teaches reading, arithmetic, and the art of ignoring heat stroke. The kids wander in. Shoes are optional. Clean hands are a fantasy. One brings a billy goat tied to a rope. No one questions it. The goat sits by the wall like it's enrolled. You take a seat in the back, unnoticed. Just an observer. The room is alive with dust motes and the occasional sigh. The lesson today is about spelling, but the wind howling through the cracks makes the letters rattle in the air. Government, the teacher says, and a dozen slates scratch shakily. One kid writes, "Government," and shrugs. Honestly, you've seen worse in newspapers. Education in the 19th century Bush is equal parts hope and improvisation. Historians still argue whether Bush schools provided genuine opportunity or just barely functional childcare. Most kids don't stay long enough to find out. By age 10, they're out helping herd, shear, or haul. By 12, they are practically adults. By 15, some are married. Today's lunch break consists of cold bread, a tin of goat milk, and someone's bruised apple that may or may not be a science experiment. The kids eat sitting on logs, dust kicking up with every bite. You watch as a boy pulls out a dead beetle and pretends to auction it off. His classmates bid with pebbles. One girl wins, and immediately names it Sir Lexington. This is normal. You spot a corner shelf labeled library. It contains 7 books, 2 of which are missing pages, one is about turnips, and one is a Bible so large it could be used to press laundry. Still, the kids leaf through them eagerly. One whispers words aloud like they're spells. Maybe they are. The quirky fact of the day? Some schools had attendance incentives like honey drops, pencils, or the chance to ring a makeshift bell. One remote school even awarded first pick at bathwater. The reward system was simple: show up, stay awake, and don't cry when bitten by ants. The teacher tells a story after lunch. It's about explorers getting lost in the bush and surviving by eating boiled saddle leather. The kids are transfixed. You are too. The tale's not sanitized. It ends with someone being found dead beside a waterhole they never saw. No one blinks. They've seen worse. You notice the drawings on the walls. Some are animals: kangaroos, dingoes, fat birds with impossible beaks. Some are people, stick figures with oversized hats and exaggerated noses. And a few are storms. Big, black spirals with lightning bolts that look more like angry worms. You ask the teacher. That's what they remember most, she says. The sky getting mad. Afternoons are for sums and patience. The kids wrestle with numbers like they're wild animals. They count in pebbles, dried beans, and occasionally bits of string. One boy swears for times 8 is don't care. He's not entirely wrong. The teacher doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Her chalk does it for her, snapping, slicing, screeching. You imagine she's carved knowledge into many a skull. With or without permission. Outside, the wind picks up. Dust blows in, and the windows rattle like old bones. The teacher calmly walks to the door, spits into a rag, and uses it to wipe the panes. You watch the kids do the same with their slates. Dust management is just part of life here. Like breathing. Like scratching. Like boiling tea during recess. Yes, even the children drink tea. Weak and milky, served from a dented kettle the teacher keeps on a shelf. There's a kind of reverence to it. Like it connects them to something bigger: parents, routines, the vague hope that civilization exists past the next hill. You ask one child what he wants to be. He says, tall. That's it. Another wants to be a shearer. Another wants to own a cow that doesn't kick. No one says doctor or scientist or lawyer. They don't know those words. Not really. And yet, they're smart. They know how to spot a storm by the color of clouds. They can tie a dozen kinds of knots. They can throw rocks with precision NASA would envy. And they know how to make a game out of nothing but dirt and imagination. As the day ends, the teacher assigns a reading from the turnip book. The kids groan. But they'll do it. Because they know tomorrow the book might be gone. Or they might be. That's how life moves here, in gusts. You walk out with them, the goat following too. The sunset bleeds across the sky like spilled ink. A few kids wave. One offers you a pebble. It's magic, he says. You take it, because who are you to argue? That night, you sit by your fire with the pebble in your pocket and your billy boiling slow. You think of that classroom full of bare feet and scribbled slates. You think about how sometimes learning isn't about facts or formulas. Sometimes it's about surviving with enough words to explain why you keep trying. You're 23 kilometers from the nearest anything, and you've just realized the water bag is dry. Not oh, better find a stream dry, bone dry. The kind of dry where your tongue starts making deals with your brain just to stay moist. Welcome to the outback's favorite hobby, killing people very slowly. You keep walking, because there's no other choice. The sun hangs overhead like a punishment, and the ground crunches under your boots like burnt toast. You watch a crow overhead circle you, as if it knows something you don't. You tip your hat to it out of pettiness. This section of Australia doesn't bother pretending to be habitable. No rivers. No shade. Just an endless sheet of browns and greys, and heat so intense it hums in your ears. It doesn't just cook you, it boils you. From the inside. So how do you not die? You watch the land. That's step one. You learn to read clouds like fortunes. Low and dark? Rain, maybe. High and puffy? Hotter than Satan's breadbox. You squint at the trees. If the eucalyptus are curling their leaves tight, it means they're conserving moisture, and you should too. Bush survival is an unspoken language of small signs. There's a patch of ants you just stepped over, following a trail that curves uphill. That could mean water. Or a dead thing. Could go either way. You follow it anyway, because hope is often the only currency you have. Historians still argue whether early settlers learned bushcraft fast enough to survive, or whether sheer stubbornness carried them until better systems arrived. Some did try to learn from Aboriginal guides, if they were lucky enough to meet one willing to teach. Others refused help entirely and walked themselves into graves of their own making. A practical tip passed around among stockmen: if you find gum leaves that look glossy, boil them. The steam's not drinkable, but inhaling it can give your lungs the illusion of relief. Is it scientifically sound? Not particularly. Does it help? Sometimes. That's good enough. One old swagman once told you to suck on pebbles. Not because they have water, but because the act of sucking tricks your brain into salivating. It keeps the panic down, gives your tongue something to do, and feels vaguely like lemonade if you imagine hard enough. You reach a ridge, and suddenly, miraculously, there's a clay pan. A shallow basin that, after the last rain, still holds water thick as soup. You check for signs of death. Dead birds? Nope. Floating bugs? A few. You cup your hands anyway. You don't drink. Not yet. You filter through a rag first, then boil it. It tastes like regret. But it's wet. You live. You make camp under a wattle tree, which smells like something between honey and old socks. Still, it provides the only shade for kilometers. You cook a bit of salt meat, tougher than the leather straps holding your pack together, and chew until your jaw aches. Then you boil tea. Because of course you do. Even out here, where death politely waits behind every rock, tea is still your ritual. Your reward. Your line in the sand that says, "I'm still here." The billy sings over the flame like it doesn't know how close you came to becoming bones on a hillside. You remember a story from an old tracker you met once. He said to walk with the land, not across it. That meant avoiding ridges in daylight. Hugging tree lines where the wind moved. Walking beside, not through, animal tracks. Don't force the bush, he said. It bites back. You're starting to believe it. A quirky tip: some settlers carried onion slices to rub on their skin against sunburn. Others used candle wax, pig fat, or, disturbingly, crocodile dung. That one was thankfully short-lived. Possibly because it attracted more crocodiles. You set your boots aside and stretch out on a bed of spinifex, wincing as it stabs you lovingly. You watch the sky lose its color. The stars come out like slow embers. A dingo howls in the distance, and your spine reacts before your brain does. It's a strange kind of peace. Your nerves are raw, your lips are cracked, your feet look like someone tried to punish them with a cheese grater, but you're alive. That counts for something. Tomorrow you'll walk again. Or maybe you'll stay here for a day and listen to the wind argue with the trees. Maybe you'll follow another ant trail. Maybe you'll find a creek. Maybe not. The outback doesn't promise anything except that it will always be here. You're the temporary one. Before bed, you write a few notes in your journal. Just enough to remember this place, this near death, this unlikely peace. You sketch a bird that circled overhead today. It looked like it had opinions. You name it Gary. The tea cools in your tin mug. You drink it slow. It tastes better now. Less like desperation. More like defiance. There's no one to cheer for you. No audience, no medals, no parades. Just the quiet acknowledgement between you and the stars that, for one more night, you've managed to outwit the silence. And that feels like a victory. You wake to the sound of sheep, not the gentle baaing you'd hoped for, but a full-blown ovine riot. Somewhere in the mob, someone's trampled a feed sack, someone else is stuck in a trough, and a third is attempting, unsuccessfully, to headbutt a fence post into submission. Welcome to shearing season. It's barely dawn, but the air is already warm and smells like wool, dust, and the kind of sweat that's earned, not accidental. You rub your eyes, lace your boots, and mutter your first curse of the day into your teacup. The billy's already blackened from last night's fire, still full of yesterday's leaves because, honestly, you were too tired to care. The shearing shed looms nearby like an exhausted cathedral. Timber walls, corrugated roof, and the constant thudding rhythm of blades meeting fleece. Inside, it's a hot box of motion, shearers bent like crooked machines, sweat pouring, flecks of wool sticking to every crevice like itchy snow. You're on wool-throwing duty today. That means grabbing each fleece the second it's cut, flinging it across the sorting table, and praying it doesn't collapse into a pile of shame. There's a method to the madness: keep the fleece whole, edges out, skirt the dirty bits, flick the burrs, stack the good stuff. Then do it again. And again. And again. You stop counting after fleece 16. Your arms burn. Your back is starting to whisper threats. Wool was everything in 19th century Australia. It was called white gold, and for good reason. Exports of greasy fleece built towns, funded rail lines, and padded more than one banker's chair. Historians still argue whether it elevated Australia or simply shackled it to sheep for a century too long. What's clear, everyone had a stake in it. Even you. The sheep themselves are not amused. They arrive in a flurry of bleats and bad moods, herded by dogs that deserve sainthood. The moment the shearer grabs one and flips it on its rump, it goes limp, not relaxed, just stunned. Like it knows it's about to lose 5 kilos of dignity and body heat. The shearers are all lean muscle, calloused hands, and expressions that suggest they haven't felt joy since 1847. Their blades snick through fleece with terrifying precision. No electric clippers here, just good old-fashioned hand shears, honed to a whisper-thin edge and held like extensions of the soul. And yes, there's blood. Not much, but enough. A nick here, a slice there. The sheep don't flinch. Neither do the men. You wipe the shears. You mop the floor. You keep working. A quirky tradition, some sheds used to award a bottle of rum to the fastest shearer at the end of the day. Others handed out medals, handshakes, or just the privilege of first wash in the water trough. One legend tells of a bloke who sheared 200 sheep in a single day, shirtless, with a broken toe, and no water breaks. You don't know if it's true. Frankly, you don't want it to be. By mid-morning, the shed smells like boiled wool, boot polish, and tragedy. Everyone's shirtless now, or close to it. The flies are having a party on your forehead. You boil tea outside just to breathe something that isn't lanolin and regret. You sip your brew while watching a newly shorn sheep stumble out into the yard, looking like a wet poodle crossed with a crime scene. It blinks, dazed, like it can't believe what just happened. You sympathize. Inside, the fleece presses pile high. Bales are packed tight, branded with station marks, and hoisted like hay bricks. There's pride in a tight bale. It means no waste, no gaps, no slop. You help stamp one down and feel like a hero for 5 seconds before your shoulder gives out. Lunch is bread, jerky, and more tea. Always tea. One bloke adds condensed milk from a rusty tin. It slurps out like honey and makes the brew taste like nostalgia and mild food poisoning. You try it anyway. There's little talking during the work. Just grunts, nods, the occasional swear muttered lovingly to a sheep that kicked someone in the chin. You see a young kid trying to drag a ram twice his size into the pen. It's like watching David fight Goliath, if Goliath had hooves and no patience. You step in to help, and together you haul the beast in. It sits, sulking. The boy grins like he's conquered something ancient. Maybe he has. Outside, the wool table creaks under the weight of fleece. You flick out twigs, manure clumps, the occasional beetle who's made a home in a sheep's backside. You throw the wool wide, let it land soft, roll the edges in like pastry dough. It's oddly satisfying, like baking with sweat and animal oil. The sun climbs. The heat presses harder. Everyone slows but doesn't stop. The pace is sacred. You finish one sheep and start the next because pausing means admitting you're mortal. You think about how many of these men lived their whole lives in sheds like this. Hands curled from shears, spines bent from decades of work, lungs full of dust. Some went deaf from the rhythm. Some drank themselves quiet. Some just kept going. Historians say the shearing sheds built the country. But they forget to mention what they cost. As the sun begins to droop, the last of the sheep is hauled out. The floor is a battlefield of fleece crumbs and footprints. The men sit, hunched, sipping tea like it's wine. No one speaks much. You all smell like damp wool and dead ambition. You walk outside and breathe air that doesn't vibrate with bleats. The stars begin to show, one by one. Your belly boils again. You drink slowly, muscles aching, but with that ache that says, you did something today. You're too tired to smile. But the tea does it for you. Tomorrow, more sheep. More fleece. More sweat. But tonight? You've earned the silence. You arrive in a mining town that doesn't quite know what it wants to be yet, half gold dream, half fever swamp. The buildings are mostly tents with ideas above their station. Corrugated iron roofs shimmer in the sun like misplaced armor. Streets are really just paths stomped flat by desperate boots and the occasional donkey with attitude. This is gold country. Mid-19th century. Victoria, maybe. Or New South Wales. Doesn't matter. What matters is the promise, get rich fast, then get out. Or, more often, don't get rich and just stay anyway. The air smells like ambition and bad hygiene. You pass a man who hasn't washed in a month but flashes teeth like coins when he hears the word strike. You pass another muttering to himself, clutching a pouch of dirt like it's a love letter. Everyone here is one lucky pan away from legend. You camp near a creek with a dozen other fools. You've got your pick and pan, a hat with a hole, and tea leaves you're rationing like gold dust. You boil the billy beside a stump and listen to a prospector swear at a tree for not being a nugget. It's a strange kind of community. No rules, but everyone follows the same rhythm. Wake early, dig frantically, get disappointed, then drink enough tea to lie convincingly about how tomorrow's your day. Historians still argue whether the Australian gold rush improved the colony or just spread chaos in boots. Sure, there were riches, some towns did bloom, briefly. But most people found flakes, not fortunes. And many left poorer than they arrived, with worn-out shoes and backaches as souvenirs. You get to work. Panning looks easy, like a romantic dance with water and chance. It's not. It's endless crouching, wrist flicking, squinting at mud, and wondering if that shiny bit is gold or just a particularly arrogant pebble. Spoiler, it's usually the pebble. Your shoulders burn. Your knees ache. Your fingers prune. You sip tea between washes, the liquid earthy and smoky, brewed over a fire fueled by eucalyptus twigs and crushed optimism. It gives you just enough energy to hope again. A man beside you claims he found a nugget once as big as a bull's eye. You don't ask which kind of bull. He seems a bit twitchy. He offers you a sip of something stronger than tea. You decline. You've heard the stories, moonshine that could peel paint and reset your memory. There's tension here. Real tension. Too many men, not enough luck. One fellow had his claim jumped last week. He came back swinging a shovel and shouting about justice. The town responded by shrugging. Then they helped him dig the next hole. You hear tales of Chinese miners too, hard-working, efficient, but treated like ghosts. They build neat camps, wash their clothes, and somehow find gold in the places everyone else gave up on. Quirky historical detail, some even boiled rice in their tea water, giving it a floral, bitter taste. You try it once. It's weird. But not bad. There's a store in town, if you can call a tent full of barrels a store. They sell pickaxes, flour, questionable boots, and tins of preserved peaches marked up to kingdom come. Tea, though? Still in stock. Still sacred. Still the first thing everyone buys when the digging's done. You meet a woman selling damper and boiled eggs near the diggings. She's got 3 teeth and a laugh like dry kindling, but her bread is warm and her story's warmer. She says she once found gold in a chicken's stomach. You decide not to ask. Your claim turns up nothing today. Again. Just clay and old bones and a nail that might have belonged to someone unlucky. You keep it anyway. Could be lucky in reverse. You sit near the fire that night, boots steaming and knees cracking, staring into the pan like it might speak. Your hands are blistered, your face is sunburned, and your tea is the only thing not judging you. A group nearby sings out of tune, something about going home rich and marrying twins. You chuckle. They probably will. Just not at the same time. You're told about a nearby mine where someone really did strike it big. Like huge big. Enough to buy land, a brick house, maybe even a clean shirt. But that was last month. He's gone now. No one remembers his name, just the rumor of his wealth. That's the thing about gold towns. They're built on echoes. You trade a few buttons for a new tin mug. Your old one's cracked, and honestly, you need a win. You boil a new batch of tea, breathing in the steam like it's medicine. It's strong tonight, too much leaf, maybe, but you like it that way. Bitter fits the mood. You look at the stars and wonder what you're doing. You could have stayed on the coast. You could have farmed potatoes. You could have married the girl who laughed at your dumb poems. But no. You came here for gold. You got tea. And somehow, that feels enough. Because even if tomorrow's another day of dust and disappointment, even if the pan stays empty and your back gives out, there's still this moment. This fire. This warmth. This quiet. And that tin mug of tea in your hands, hot, dark, slightly burnt, reminds you that you're still here. Still trying. Still human in a place that forgets your name. You walk into a settlement so small it doesn't even pretend to have a name, just a string of huts, 2 drovers arguing near a fence, and a general store with the front half missing. You've been here before. Or somewhere just like it. These places repeat themselves, same flies, same smells, same lingering scent of boiling tea hanging in the air like incense. Inside the store, there are shelves lined with flour, dried peaches, soap made from mutton fat, and nails sold individually like rare gems. But front and center, next to the till, beside the matches, elevated like a holy relic, are the tea tins. Black, dusty, dented, and guarded like treasure. Because out here, tea isn't just tea. It's currency. It's medicine. It's how you say hello, goodbye, sorry for shooting your dog, and thank you for not burning my shed down. The storekeeper eyes you like he's pricing your soul. You place 2 buttons and a half roll of wire on the counter. He slides a tin across, doesn't blink. Transaction complete. No one talks money out here unless it's about sheep or beer. Tea works better. Always has. It's one of the few things the colonies managed to make sacred without realizing it. A hot brew in a cleanish mug is worth more than a warm bed. Or, in some cases, it is the price of a warm bed. You head out, tin tucked under your arm like loot. One of the drovers gives you a nod. You nod back. Nothing needs to be said. You both know what it means. Historians still debate how essential tea was to settle a culture. Some argue it was just a comfort, cheap, familiar, British. Others say it held society together with tannins and sheer determination. Either way, the records are clear, from convicts to governors, everyone drank it. And if you didn't have any? You begged, borrowed, or brawled for it. You make camp behind a ruined fence. The sheep wander nearby, eyes half-lidded with boredom or wisdom, hard to tell. You pull out your billy, fill it with creek water, and set it over the flame. The fire cracks, the water simmers, and soon the tea leaves unfurl like secrets. You sip. It's too hot. It scalds your lip. You smile anyway. There's an old rumor that some people use tea leaves for fortune-telling. You swirl your cup, watching the fragments settle at the bottom. One looks like a boot. Another like a snake. You decide to ignore that last one. Tea is also gossip fuel. You've learned more around campfires with a hot mug than in a dozen town meetings. Who married who? Who ran off? Who didn't come back from a trip west? One sip, and someone always opens up. It's the most honest drink in the outback. There's etiquette too. Offer tea before anything else. Always. Even if you hate someone. Especially if you hate someone. One shearer told you he once made peace with a rival over a shared billy and a fight about cricket. By the third cup, they were laughing. By the fourth, they were throwing fists again. Still. Progress. In some camps, tea leaves were so scarce they'd be dried and reused. Poured out, spread on canvas, then boiled again the next day. By cup 3, the flavor had left the building, but the idea of tea remained. And sometimes, that's all you needed. Quirky fact, a few stations trained their dogs to fetch the billy when the boss clapped twice. You saw it once, Kelpie trots over, snatches the string handle in its teeth, and delivers it like a sacred offering. The dog got a biscuit. You got jealous. You remember one station cook, Old Meg, who made tea porridge. Just oats, sugar, and tea so thick it could have been classified as a mineral. She said it was good for your insides and terrible for everything else. You tried it once. Your stomach still brings it up during thunderstorms. Back at your camp, the billy whistles again. You pour a second cup, this one darker, richer, and vaguely metallic. Probably your tin mug corroding. You drink it anyway. Another traveler passes near your fire, bearded, limping, eye scanning the ground like he's lost more than a boot. You raise your mug. He pauses. You nod toward the billy. He walks in, sits without a word. You pour him tea. That's the agreement. No one needs to say who they are. You just share silence, warmth, and caffeine. He pulls out a bit of damper and breaks it in half. You trade him a spoonful of tobacco. Nothing formal. Just balance. The night falls in layers, crickets, breeze, stars. The sheep settle. The traveler leans back, cup in hand, and finally speaks. She left me. You say nothing. You sip. You wait. She said I never saw her. That I loved the land more. He swirls his tea. Maybe she's right. You pour more for him. He nods. The fire pops. You let the silence do its job. Because that's what tea is best at, holding space for the unspeakable. Offering warmth when words fail. Making a moment feel safe. Eventually, he stands, sets the cup down carefully, and walks off into the dark. You never ask his name. The fire crackles low now. The tea's gone cold. You swirl the leaves one last time. This time, they look like a trail. Maybe they are. You've been sneezing for the last hour. Not cute, polite sneezes, the violent kind that make your spine contract and your vision blur. You clutch your chest like you've just inhaled a wasp. Which, out here, is not off the table. Welcome to medicine, bush style. You're sick. Or maybe you're just allergic to everything within a 5-kilometer radius. Either way, your nose is leaking, your throat's on fire, and your tea tastes like something someone already drank once. Out here, there's no doctor. No apothecary. No one in a white coat asking you to say ah. There's just you, your Billy, and a suspicious-looking jar of eucalyptus leaves someone swore would fix everything from toothaches to heartbreak. You boil them anyway. You breathe in the minty, eye-watering fumes and try to pretend it's a spa day instead of an outback exorcism. Historically, medical care in 19th century Australia was, let's be generous and say creative. Most people lived days or even weeks from the nearest trained practitioner, and even then, trained often meant they'd read one book and didn't scream at the sight of blood. Historians still argue whether the bush's medicine culture was mostly theft of indigenous knowledge, desperate improvisation, or both. One thing's clear, if something grew, someone tried to boil it. If something oozed, someone rubbed it on their chest. You lie under a wool blanket, sweating through your shirt. A kettle hisses on the fire. Inside, crushed bark, a spoon of honey, and the last of your lemon peel, saved from a fruit that once had dreams of being eaten fresh. Someone once told you to rub possum fat on your feet to draw out fever. You don't. Not because it sounds insane, but because you don't currently have a possum. Or fat. Or dignity. You do, however, have kerosene. Which, according to old-timers, cures everything from lice to loneliness. You dab a bit on a cloth and tie it around your neck like a martyr. You immediately regret it. There's a knock at your lean-to, more like a soft rustle, really. It's old Ellen from 2 kilometers down the track. She's brought soup. And judgment. Still alive, she asks, in the way bush women do when they care but won't admit it. Barely, you croak. She sets down a tin mug filled with something brown and vaguely herbal. Drink it, she says. You hesitate. It's not poison, she adds. Probably. You drink. It tastes like sadness with a hint of bark. You thank her. She sits for a moment, folds her arms, and glances around your camp like it personally offends her. You need more blankets, she says. Then, and fewer rats. She's not wrong. A quirky remedy, some settlers believed snakebite could be cured by gunpowder and brandy. Others swore by cutting an X over the bite and sucking the venom out. One man tried both and reportedly died with a weird smile on his face. You cough hard enough to scare the sheep. Ellen sighs and hands you a pouch of dried leaves. Wattle bark, she explains. Boil it. Gargle it. Spit it. Don't swallow unless you want to hallucinate a little. You nod. She leaves with a parting gift, a frown and an unsolicited prayer. You think she means well. You hope. You settle back into your bedroll, the world spinning slightly. The fever has started whispering. It tells you you're in a ballroom. You are not. You're in a shack with a hole in the roof and 3 lizards watching you like judges on a reality show. Your tea is cold. You sip it anyway. It tastes of eucalyptus and weak resolve. The night gets strange. You dream of being chased by a chicken with human teeth. You wake with sweat in your eyes and your shirt twisted around your ribs. You breathe in. You choke. You boil water. Again. This time, you add ginger root someone gave you last week, along with a note that said, "Trust me." You do. Desperation is the most loyal belief system you've ever had. The tea is bitter but clears your head for 5 minutes. You feel almost human. Then you sneeze again and it's over. Morning comes with the sun poking through the canvas like a nosy neighbor. You sit up slowly, check your pulse, still there, and boil another billy because routine is half the cure. You feel 10% better. Maybe 8%. But it's enough to walk. You pack up your makeshift apothecary, leaves, bark, maybe medicinal twigs, and strap them to your stool bag like treasure. You don't know what most of them do. But they smell convincing. And out here, that counts for something. Before you go, you write in your notebook. Cures attempted. Boiled eucalyptus. Kerosene rag, terrible idea. Ellen soup, traumatizing. Hallucinated chicken therapy, inconclusive. You walk out into the sunlight, still aching, still sniffling, but upright. That's a win. You take one last sip of your now lukewarm tea. It tastes like bark and survival. Better than most medicines. The sky turns orange without warning. Not a lovely sunset kind of orange. The angry, thick, choking kind. You smell it before you see it. Smoke. Dry, sharp, fast-moving. And then the heat. Not the sun-baked kind you've been cursing all summer, this is the kind that travels with the wind. You stand up fast. Your tin mug spills. Tea forgotten. A bushfire is coming. No one has to yell it. You just know. The way animals scatter. The way the sheep suddenly run, not meander. The way the birds vanish like pulled out of the sky by invisible strings. There's a saying out here, when the wind changes, run. But sometimes, the wind doesn't give you that courtesy. Sometimes, it doubles back like a whip and comes for you sideways. You grab what you can, your pack, your boots, your billy, because of course, and you start moving. Fast. Not toward town. That's too far. You need a clearing, a creek, a miracle. Any of those would do. The fire isn't a line, it's a front. Thick and rolling, like the edge of the world's angriest curtain. It eats dry scrub in seconds. Fence posts explode. Trees light from the inside out like someone struck a match in their hearts. You've seen fire before. In the stove, in the camp, in a pipe. But this is different. This is a creature. Loud, hungry, alive. You reach a bend in the dry creek bed and drop to your knees, heart galloping. The wind shifts again. The smoke follows like a jealous lover. You've heard stories, how fast it moves, how silent it can be when it wants to. Historians still argue about the biggest bushfire of the century. Some say Black Thursday in 1851, where 12 lives and 1 million sheep vanished in a single sweep. Others argue it was later, in Queensland, or Victoria again. But the numbers never really tell the story. Fire doesn't care about records. You've seen the aftermath, twisted metal, hollowed-out homesteads, skeleton trees. A kettle melted into rock. A fence line that leads nowhere. Right now, you're just hoping not to become part of that story. You keep moving along the creek bed. It's dry, cracked, mostly useless, but it's the lowest ground you can find. You remember someone once saying fire moves faster uphill. You hope they weren't lying. You spot a wheelbarrow tipped on its side near an old fence line. Someone tried to flee. You imagine them loading it with whatever they could, blankets, a photo, a baby goat named Steve. Who knows? You hope they made it. The sky darkens. It's not even night yet. The smoke blots out the sun like a curtain drawn by a furious god. You wet your shirt with the last of your water and tie it around your face. The scent of eucalyptus smoke fills your nose, eyes, throat. You feel gritty inside. You think of your tea mug. Still sloshing a bit in your pack. Still warm. Still real. It's absurd, but in this moment, it's the most stable thing you have. You duck into a hollow, a gully scorched black by last week's burn. It's eerie how calm it feels here. No leaves left. No fuel. Just ash. It might save you. You crouch. You wait. The fire passes like a train. Roaring. Screaming. Everything in motion. Wind, flame, smoke, debris. Sparks leap like fleas from a hot dog. A branch lands meters away, still alight. You press your body flat and pray the gully holds. It does. Eventually, it does. When the wind dies, and the roar turns into hissing embers, you rise slowly. Everything smells cooked. The world is grey, black, and smoking at the edges. Trees still stand, but barely. You walk, carefully, watching for heat pockets and silent collapses. A kangaroo bolts past, eyes wide, fur singed. You blink at each other. Two survivors. You nod. It nods. You both keep walking. You reach what's left of a fence line. The wood is gone. Only twisted wire remains, like veins pulled from the ground. You find your way back to where your camp was. There's nothing left but your kettle. Burnt black, misshapen, but still holding water. You don't even question it. You fill your mug. Boil what's left over a shaky fire. The flames feel smaller now. Quieter. You drink slowly, hands trembling. Tea, once again, is the only thing that makes sense. A quirky note you remember reading once: some settlers swore by wrapping damp wool around their ankles to confuse fire. You always thought that was silly. Now you wonder if anything's really silly when it keeps you alive. The stars return, faint behind smoke haze. The moon glows orange, like it's been watching. You sit in the suit, sipping tea. And you think, not of what you lost, but of what fire didn't take. Tomorrow, you'll rebuild. Or move. Or just walk in a new direction. But tonight, you're still breathing. Still warm. Still here. Still sipping. You wake up coughing. Again. Not the sick kind this time, just the usual morning routine of clearing out a night's worth of dust from your throat, your nose, your ears, your dreams. It's in everything. On everything. You're pretty sure you're going to find dust in your tea one day that's older than you are. Managing dust isn't a chore out here. It's a lifestyle. A never-ending performance of wiping, brushing, soaking, hanging, and muttering under your breath. It invades your food, sneaks into your bedroll, and somehow ends up in the pages of your notebook even when you haven't opened it. The floor of your hut is packed earth, used to be swept with a broom, until the broom gave up and became a doorstop. Now you manage with a leafy branch and an aggressive attitude. The windows are open because they have to be. But open windows mean dust. Closed windows also mean dust. So you just pick your poison. You remember one bush trick: hang damp sheets over the doorway. The dust sticks to the fabric instead of floating into your lungs. Problem is, the fabric dries out in 20 minutes and then becomes a sort of reverse dust sprinkler. You do it anyway. Because what else is there? You boil tea next to a table you wiped yesterday. It's already coated again. You give up. You pour the water. The billy hisses. You don't even bother picking the grit off the rim of your mug anymore. You tell yourself it adds texture. Historians still argue whether settlers adapted to the dust, or if they just resigned themselves to being coated in a permanent layer of outback seasoning. Some diaries mention red fog days, when dust storms rolled in so thick they blotted out the sun. Others just stopped writing and started scratching the weather into their walls instead. Your neighbor once tried to fight back with a mop soaked in vinegar. Claimed it tamed the devil air. All it did was make his shack smell like pickled despair. You keep a tin of flour in a sealed barrel. One time, you opened it during a storm and watched a swirl of red settle over the top like paprika. You made damper with it anyway. It crunched. Out here, there are entire systems for managing the daily onslaught. Curtains are soaked and re-soaked. Plates are stored upside down. Cups are rinsed 3 times before being used. And tea is covered with a saucer between sips like it's hiding from a sniper. You meet a woman who cleans her child's face with spit and the corner of her apron. "Dust wipes clean," she says. Eventually. The kid just grins, dirt-packed teeth and all. You think he might be made of clay. A quirky detail from a station down south, they invented a dust room. A small, sealed chamber built from wet canvas where people could sit and breathe clean air. It lasted one season before the roof caved in and the canvas grew mold. People still talked about it like it was Eden. You start noticing how you move. Every gesture has an adjustment. Swipe your cup before sipping, pat your sleeves before sitting, wipe your nose down so you don't inhale more. It's like being constantly allergic to your own life. Your boots are dust-colored now. They used to be brown. You think. You meet a shearer who carries a brush in his belt like a holster. Before meals, he dusts his seat. Before smoking, he dusts the tobacco. He's known as Whiskers. No one knows his real name anymore. You once heard of a man who tried to sweep his roof. Climbed up, broom in hand, yelling about conquering the sky. He fell through and landed in his wife's stew. She didn't speak to him for a week. But the stew was excellent. Your own shack isn't immune. You think about sealing the cracks with mud, but then remember the mud becomes dust once the heat hits it. So you do what everyone else does, accept it. Fight it. Curse it. Laugh at it. Repeat. You sit by the fire, evening setting in. The wind picks up, a soft dry whisper. You feel it on your skin before you see it. Dust storm incoming. Again. You pull a wet rag over your nose, press a rock against your tin roof, and wait. It arrives like a wall. Red. Thick. Mean. You close your eyes. You sip your tea. It tastes of burnt leaves and tiny pebbles. You tell yourself it's rustic. When the storm passes, you sweep. You always sweep. You dump out your cup and start again. Because there's something about brewing tea after the storm. The act of boiling water, of choosing leaves, of sipping despite the grit between your teeth, it feels like defiance. Or at least a middle finger made of steam. The stars return. Faint through the haze. But still there. You drink your dusty tea. And it tastes like routine. Like persistence. Like home. You're sitting at a campfire with a man named Spider. No last name. Just Spider. He claims to have once survived a cyclone by tying himself to a pig. You believe him, not because the story makes sense, but because he's the sort of man the bush produces when no one's watching. Out here, the weird ones don't just exist, they thrive. They grow like feral cucumbers, twisting around the edges of society and blooming into something that's either genius or madness or both. Spider makes his tea with a stone in the billy, swears it balances the brew. You ask what kind of stone. He shrugs. One that looked thirsty. You meet these folks sometimes. Not in towns. They're allergic to pavement. They live in shacks that lean like they're listening for gossip. Their hats are too big. Their boots too small. Their eyes too knowing. And yet, they're useful. Spider once pulled a thorn from your horse's hoof using a fork and a hymn. Another woman, Miss Penny, set your shoulder when you fell off a ridge. She said she learned from a medical book she used to press wildflowers. The flower pages were lovely. The medical diagrams, less so. Historians still puzzle over these figures. Some were ex-convicts who vanished into the interior and re-emerged a decade later with pet dingoes and untraceable accents. Others were born out here, raised on ash cakes and snake lore, never once seeing the ocean. You meet a fellow called Glass-Eyed Charlie. Wears 2 eye patches. Claims he sees better that way. Says he was once bitten by a platypus and woke up fluent in French. You test this by saying bonjour. He replies, how dare you, and stomps off. You apologize. To the air. Then there's Nellie Two Knives, who butchers goats and reads palms. She insists you'll live a long life full of dust and regret. You ask if the dust part is optional. She laughs. Deep, low, like the land itself just made a joke and only she heard it. These people aren't sideshows. They're survival incarnate. They know where the water hides. They can smell a snake from 50 paces. They know which leaf heals and which one sends you to meet God early. A quirky tidbit, you once met a man who believed tea should only be stirred counterclockwise. He said clockwise brewed bad dreams. He wouldn't drink unless you let him spin the cup like a record. You humored him. He repaid you with a story about a sheep that laid eggs. You didn't ask questions. Tonight, Spider tells tales. He speaks of a horse named Monday who refused to walk uphill on Wednesdays. Of a haunted outhouse that mooed at night. Of a neighbor who built a still so powerful it caught fire from thinking about boiling. You sip your tea and let it all wash over you. The truth doesn't matter here. Only the telling. There's a freedom in it. These oddball settlers live outside time. They carry watches that don't tick, but they always know when rain is coming. They speak slowly, like each word costs a drop of blood, and they laugh like nothing could ever surprise them again. One built a wind-powered clothesline that worked once, then took flight and decapitated a chicken. Another claims to be married to a ghost, though he swears she nags less than his first wife. You begin to wonder if you're becoming one of them. Your hat's looking more like a personality than an accessory. You've named your Billy. You've started referring to certain shrubs as old friends. And just yesterday, you yelled at a dust devil and felt better after. The line between eccentric and essential blurs fast in the bush. What looks mad in the city keeps you breathing out here. One man, you never caught his name, built an entire fence out of bones. Sheep, kangaroo, one suspiciously large rib that may have once belonged to something prehistoric. He called it the polite barrier. You didn't ask why. You once passed a hut with 30 wind chimes made from forks. It sounded like a cutlery apocalypse in the wind. Inside lived a woman who brewed tea with crushed bark and called it silent syrup. You drank it. Didn't talk for 2 days. Coincidence? There's no central authority here. No sheriff. No priest. No mayor. The weirdos are the infrastructure. They're the midwives, the fence menders, the snake catchers. If your roof leaks, you call Possum Jim. If your kid swallows a nail, you go to Toothless Grace. They operate on barter and principle. One story, one favor, one spoonful of sugar at a time. You offer Spider more tea. He declines. Says he's off the leaf after it started speaking to him in his dreams. You believe him. The fire burns low. The stars press in. And you realize, this is the real map of Australia. Not the lines drawn on charts, but the people drawn from silence and dust and peculiar logic. People who built lives out of scraps and strangeness. You pack up, nod to Spider, and start walking. He calls after you. Keep your boots tied and your stories loose. Good advice. You don't know where you're going next. But odds are, someone strange and wonderful is already there, boiling tea, telling lies, and waiting for company. The silence hits differently out here. Not just quiet, silence. That full-bodied kind that sinks into your bones and starts whispering old regrets into your ears. You wake to it. You sleep with it. You carry it like another item in your pack. Some days it weighs more than water. You're camped 100 miles from anything. No drovers. No sheep. No ghost towns. Just space. Open, brutal space. The nearest sound is a crow so far away its core sounds like a memory. The fire's gone cold. Your tea's lukewarm. Your thoughts, though, those are red hot. You're alone. Not the fun kind. Not the time to recharge alone. I haven't heard another human voice in 9 days and I'm starting to talk to the trees alone. And the trees are starting to reply. The funny thing is, you chose this. Like so many others out here. Men and women who chased land or gold or dreams or just distance from something they couldn't name. Historians still argue whether the isolation of the outback was a blessing, a curse, or a slow psychological unraveling in a hat. The journals are divided. One settler called it God's quiet. Another described it as the silence loud enough to crack your ribs. You sip your tea. A beetle swims in it. You fish him out. He doesn't thank you. You used to think the wind was company. Now it just reminds you how empty this place really is. It moans through your canvas like it's grieving. Some nights you answer it. The days stretch on like bad poetry. You mend fences that no animals test. You boil water even when you're not thirsty, just to do something. You reread the same book until the pages start looking like letters from an old friend. Then a stranger. Then nothing. You've written 43 letters. None sent. No mail runs out here. You bury them in a tin box behind the shack. Maybe one day someone will find them and say, this one really didn't like flies. And yet, you keep going. Because there's a rhythm to solitude. A slow beat. If you stop fighting it, you start to feel it, like a drum inside the earth. It teaches you to notice things you didn't before. The way the kettle sings differently depending on the wind. The way the soil changes texture when it misses rain. The way a cow's lowing 2 kilometers off can sound like a choir if your ears are hungry enough. You have a cow, by the way. Her name's Margaret. She's your therapist now. You tell her everything. Your dreams, your doubts, your opinions on tea strength. She chews her cud and judges you silently. Which is fair. A quirky fact, some settlers kept mirrors in the kitchen just so they could see another face. Not for vanity, just to remember what faces looked like. One man even named his reflection and hosted imaginary dinners. You haven't gone that far. Yet. Your only calendar is a stick you notch every morning. It fell over once. You kept notching anyway. What else would you do? You've tried music. A harmonica that wheezes like a sick dog. A fiddle with 2 strings left. Sometimes you hum. Sometimes you don't. The nights are the worst. When the wind stops. When even the insects take a break. When your heartbeat feels loud. You lie in the dark and try not to count the things you miss. The way bread smells fresh. The sound of footsteps that aren't yours. A door that shuts properly. A voice that says your name. You brew another tea. This one's strong. Bitter. You didn't strain it. You want it to bite back. Margaret stares. She doesn't approve. But there's something strange in the comfort of this misery. Something honest. The land strips you bare, then hands you a mirror made of silence. And in it, you start to see yourself, not the version from before. Not the one who arrived with calloused hope and ill-fitting boots. This new version is leaner. Sharper. Quieter. Someone who doesn't flinch at emptiness anymore. You once feared being forgotten. Now you think maybe being unknown was always the point. You sit outside your hut, cup in hand, and watch the moon rise slow and swollen. No one else will see it from this angle tonight. It's yours. You whisper to it. Just to hear your own voice. It startles you a little. You sound okay. You drink the last of your tea. It's lukewarm. Dusty. Slightly herbal, thanks to the leaf you didn't mean to brew. You don't mind. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The fence. The walk. The silence. Margaret. The tea. The tea most of all. Because even in the deepest, driest, loneliest corner of the map, that tiny ritual remains. A fire. A billy. A cup. Something hot to hold in your hands while the rest of the world goes quiet. You're almost out of leaves. Not metaphorically, literally. Your tea tin rattles when you shake it, the sound hollow like the wind through a burnt-out tree. You tip it upside down, coax out a few stubborn specks, and watch them fall into your palm like dust from an old book. This is your last proper brew. It feels like the end of something. You sit by the fire, knees drawn up, the billy swaying gently over the flames. The water murmurs. The smoke curls upward. Everything feels quiet. But not the kind of silence that bruises. This one's gentler. Like a blanket, not a void. You think about how long you've been out here. You've stopped counting in days. The calendar stick rotted weeks ago. You measure time in boils now. In how long it takes to toast damper. In how often Margaret the cow sighs at you from her dusty post. You make the tea slowly. Ritualistically. There's reverence in this one. You swirl the few remaining leaves in your palm, toss them in like you're feeding an altar. You don't stir. You just watch them sink and spin, tiny galaxies collapsing in the water. This, you decide, is sacred. Historians might never quite understand it. How something so simple, leaves, water, fire, became the backbone of 19th century Australian survival. How tea stitched together mornings and memories, soothed grief, marked births, wakes, fights, friendships, firestorms, and floods. But out here, there's no debate. It's the thing that stayed when everything else left. You sip, careful. The taste is faint, smoky, a little salty from your own sweat, probably. You don't mind. You close your eyes and let it sit on your tongue like a final hymn. You remember all the places you drank it. At the edge of a creek bed in a drought so bad even the frogs gave up. Next to a gold pan filled with rocks that looked just shiny enough to ruin your week. Inside a shearing shed where the smell of sweat and wool still hasn't washed out of your skin. In a dust storm that turned the air red and made the billy sing a different tune. Beside Spider, Miss Penny, Margaret, and one traveller whose name you never knew. Tea has been your companion, your confession booth, your currency, and, sometimes, your reason to get up. Because the fire needed lighting. Because the kettle needed filling. Because a day without it didn't count as a day. You look at the bottom of the cup. There's a leaf stuck to the side. It looks like a map. You trace it with your finger. Maybe it leads somewhere. Maybe not. You think about moving on. You think about settling. You think about staying put just long enough for someone to come by and ask, "Mind if I share the fire?" And you'll nod, of course. Because if you have tea, you share it. Even if it's the last of it. A quirky detail floats back to you. In some stations, it was said that refusing to share tea was a curse, that it brought bad weather, spoiled crops, and cranky horses. You don't know if you believe that. But you've never once said no. The wind picks up a little. The sky turns bruised with twilight. You tip the mug back, drain the last of it. You don't feel sad. Not exactly. Just full. Not from the tea. From the life it's held. You set the mug down carefully. Like it's made of glass instead of dented tin. And you sit. With the fire. With the night. With everything this strange, hard, dust-coated world has given you. And taken. You don't know what comes next. But you know one thing for sure. Wherever you go, however far, however strange, you'll find a way to boil water. And something, anything, to float in it. Because tea isn't just a drink out here. It's the beginning. And the end. And everything in between. The fire's low now. The stars press quietly into the fabric of the sky, blinking soft as old embers. You breathe deeper. Slower. Your hands rest empty, the mug cooling beside you. There's no rush. Not anymore. In the distance, something calls, maybe a night bird, maybe your own thoughts finding a voice again. The wind has settled. The dust has laid down. Even the trees seem to rest, their branches unmoving in the hush. You sit a little longer, your body humming with stillness. The kind that only comes after long, hard miles. You've survived fire, thirst, silence, and storms. You've boiled tea in places the map forgot. And now, it's just you, the dark, and a sense of something closing, gently. Let the world fade now. Let it soften. Let the echo of wind and water and boiling kettles lull you into something like peace. The journey's done. The billy's empty. And somewhere, beyond this fire, beyond the dust and stars, morning is waiting. But not yet. Now, sleep. You've earned it.